Hi, hello. Can you hear me? Can the camera hear me as well? Hi, everybody. This train is about to leave the station. Amit, if you'd like to stay on the train, then I'm the one speaking today. Thank you. That's okay. She's my sister, so I can. She's my kid sister, so I can tell stuff like that to her. Please join us, gentlemen or ladies, if you're leaving, if you're coming. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of seats here on the front. You'll enjoy the presentation more. And more importantly, I will enjoy the presentation more. Oh, hello. How nice to see you. And may we begin?
Yeah, let me just say a few words. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you to our sponsors. Please make sure you silence your phones during the talk. Please come in. Towards the end, if there's time for questions, I will be passing around the mic. Just go ahead and please raise your hand. And here is our speaker, Keren.
Yes, I'll introduce myself.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, thanks for joining. Once again, for those who just joined us, there's lots of room here on the front row. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me as the closing speaker. By the way, I was supposed to be speaking yesterday morning, and thanks to the good people at Am The Cavalry, since I had a schedule change in my plans, they were flexible enough to move me to this slot right now, which is actually even more appropriate for the subject that I want to share with you today. So what I was thinking about as I was thinking about suggesting a talk for BSides Las Vegas this year, I was really thinking about the fact that this is the 10th year and that it is a massively global community. And it didn't start out so massively global. Now, I want to ask a quick question. Who here has heard me speak before? I think a couple people have. Okay. For the rest of y'all, I've got brand new jokes that nobody else has ever heard. I just got them drop shipped to Vegas just for this. But for those who have been with me on my previous talks, please don't tell everybody the answers to all my questions. I do have prizes for people who get the answers right, or at least for participating. I do absolutely encourage active participation. So as I was thinking about this, the closing talk for the I Am The Cavalry track at this year's BSides Las Vegas, I was thinking about this statement, hackers of the world unite. It was shouted out in one of my favorite movies of all time, Hackers, from 1995, a movie that significantly changed my life. And we'll get to how exactly about halfway through the talk. And I'm sure that many of you here have seen that movie as well, and it has influenced you. And if you remember, the call to action was for hackers all over the world to help the heroes of the film from New York City overcome their adversary. And we are told that, in fact, coming together as a global community can be a very powerful thing. This year, BSides celebrates the fact that there are hundreds of BSides events all over the world. Now, I was thinking about this. Actually, in our community, in the global hacker community, from my point of view, it's really interesting. I feel like we actually experience two separate things that are also represented in the Hackers film that are kind of pulling us in two separate directions. What are these two separate things? Well, on the one hand, there's that concept that the hacker community that I know is really built on, the concept of meritocracy, the concept of really bringing your capabilities to the table. And it doesn't matter exactly how you got those capabilities, it's just the fact that you have that know-how means that you can get in. Now, that can sometimes also be a little bit elitist in the sense that maybe some of you have experienced, I know I've experienced it, when the first time you come to a hacker convention, for example, and people are asking you, oh, is it your first time? Oh, I was here 10 years ago. Oh, do you know that particular person, or do you know that particular group? Or do you know all of those, the slang terms from the IRC in the 90s? And there's a little bit of that in our hacker community even today. People questioning the validity of belonging in that community. On the other hand, we absolutely have this very powerful sense of an ecosystem, of sharing. In fact, today there are hundreds and thousands of hours of hacker-powered content which is shared freely and available to people all over the world. Never before has it been this easy for people who are interested in hacking to get access to knowledge, information, or even meet a local community where they live. So how are these two opposing forces influencing our hacker community? And more than that, one thing I noticed, and this might be very clear, but it actually wasn't really clear to me until I thought about it, community also hides in it the word unity. Must we all actually be the same, talk the same way, share the same slang terms, have the same pathway into that world? I don't think that we do. And I think that our community, especially at this year, is experiencing a change. Whereas in the early 80s, 90s, even noughties, the cybersecurity world, and yes, I said cyber, and we'll get to that as well, the cybersecurity world and the hacker community was really shaped quite a lot by mostly the North American community and to some extent by the British community, or generally speaking, the English-speaking world. But that no longer is the case. And in fact, the global community of hackers today is much more ethnically and globally diverse. And how does that really work out? Well, if you remember in hackers, there are so many quotable moments, but here's one that we actually often overlook. If you recall, actually, who here has not seen Hackers? Okay, well, for those of you, sorry to call you out on that, kind of acting in the same elitist way that I was just trying to, highlight. I really recommend that you do. If you don't have the time to watch the full movie, if you dig deep enough on YouTube, there is a 3-minute fan version of Hackers, the movie, filmed by myself with the participation of many real-world hackers. You do have to look it up. It's not easily accessible online, but if you ask me afterwards nicely, maybe I'll share it with you. So you don't have to watch the whole movie. I do recommend it, though. So one interesting scene is when the plague, spoiler alert. Yes, hello. That's great information. So the movie's transcript is online. In fact, the script itself, if you really want to see the Hollywood script, you can find that as well. I actually have a signed copy of it at home. It's not the original. It's Xeroxed, but I knew a guy who used to work at the studios, and he just got it to me actually this year with like. Well, no, it's actually yes. Anyway, thank you, my lawyer. I found it in a dumpster maybe, and it doesn't have anything to do with the copyrighted film. That's And so speaking about copyright, here's, I didn't want to share a video, so here's just a screenshot of a scene from Hackers where the bad guy, spoiler alert, his nickname is the Plague, or Mr. the Plague, and he attempts to recruit the protagonist, Zero Cool. And Zero Cool says, nah, I don't play well with others. And that ethos of individualism and really being a lone gun is also deeply ingrained in the hacker community. So where are we between these three opposing forces, the individualism, the meritocracy, and the ecosystem or the wide community that's dedicated so much to sharing? If you think about it, these are almost at opposite ends. Well, I thought we could take a short trip in memory or maybe in history. And I found it actually really quite telling that the original origin of the word hacker actually kind of speaks to that. So anybody know where the word hacker originally came from? And I'm talking about like Old English, 1700s, and prior to that. Any ideas what a hacker used to be in those days? Or what the art of hacking was? You have an idea over there? Woodworking? Yeah, well, you definitely, it is a sort of word, woodworking, that's actually quite right. And it was actually somebody who would cut into pieces things from a West Germanic origin. So cut into pieces. Literally someone that would take things apart, not put them together. And actually, very interestingly, I found this really cool, perfect illustration of this hipster hacker who had just finished hacking up some, maybe chopping some wood, and now he's hacking on his, looks like maybe his blog about where to find the best tacos in Austin, just guessing because of his beard. But actually, it's a really fascinating article published by none other than the New Yorker magazine. So that's a really highbrow, kind of long-form magazine. And they actually published this little piece about the meaning of the word hacker and its origins. And I really recommend that you read it. I actually found out as well, speaking of woodworking, that a company existed called Hacker Craft. And they really took this idea that hacking is a craft, but not our type of hacking, rather woodworking and building crafts, rather boats, in fact. So this was taken off actually a boat that was the state of its art, I guess sometime in the early 20th century. So hacking actually has a pretty long history and many other meanings to what we are used to thinking about. The first actually modern use, or the use that we usually consider hack, that was recorded actually came from this. This was the model rail club, I guess. So this was at MIT, and people in the 60s would build these little railway, sorry, I can't spell my W's today. That's quite odd. Railway, yes. So it was these model railway systems that they would build and then hack on. And in their context, this actually was in one of the the protocols of one of their meetings. I think it was in 1955, where the head of the Tech Model Railroad Club asked that anyone working or hacking on the electrical system, please turn the power off to avoid fuse blowing. So this was the first modern use of the term hacking, and it originated not with computer hackers per se, but actually with these tinkerers and people working on these trains. And I thought that was kind of cool that it started in MIT, because there's another word or another thing that started in MIT that's also very influential to our community today. And that is this gentleman's work. So this is Professor Norbert Wiener. And yes, that's really his last name. And 1948, as a professor at MIT, he actually coined the term cybernetics. And that, to this day, is the reason that the prefix cyber is so prevalent in our language. And back in 1948, cybernetics was the study, or the discipline, if you will, of control and communication in the animal and the machine. So it was all about how humans are going to interact with technology. And in many ways, he was very prescient. He was ahead of his time. He wrote this at the end of the World War II, and the concept of a digital computer didn't fully exist in the sense that we know it today. Very early concepts of computers did begin to exist. So I personally feel like there's a really good reason that we actually use the term cyber in our community. But that has also been a dividing factor, if you notice, in the past couple of years. How many of you have kind of noticed or heard that people make fun of the usage of the word cyber? Quite everybody. How many of you know why, or you feel like, you know why cyber shouldn't be a word that we use? Anybody want to give me an idea? Josh, please speak up for the rest of the class. Should I repeat it? That's fine. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Cyber sex, that's right. So actually, especially in the 90s, where chat online systems were really popular, things like IRC, for example, were really popular, people were discovering that they could actually, partake in cyber sex or virtual sex by chatting and speaking to people all over the world. And for a very specific generation, I think, of people who grew up on the internet in those days, the term cyber was actually used as the verb to cyber, meaning, do you want to cyber? Meaning, would you like to partake in this sort of virtual intercourse, if you will? And today, one person here in the room knows that that's maybe one reason why the term cyber can seem laughable. And yet we all, don't use the word cyber because somehow, somewhere, we went to a conference, maybe we went to DEF CON, and we tried to use the word cyber, and people came up to us and said, well, you said cyber, now you have to have a shot, you have to have a drink because it's an unacceptable word in our world. Why is that? I really have a problem with that. In fact, when Norbert Wiener created cybernetics, he went to very classical, very cool philosophical roots. He went back to the ancient Greeks, and in fact, it was the word Kubernetes for the steersman, the person controlling the ship. That was his inspiration for cyber. And so today, I really think it does make sense to speak about cyber physical systems, especially in our world. And in fact, if you consider, and this is something I've said many times, we're no longer protecting information. We're not in the information security business per se. We are protecting cyber physical systems in the scientific term, if you really adhere to these, to his ideas. And so I actually think that it's okay to reclaim back the usage of the word cyber. But in my quest to convince you on this, I went to Wikipedia, looking up at the origins of, who else has used the word cyber. And I discovered some really curious things. I expected the first modern usage of the word cyber to be something like maybe the Air Force Cyber Command, which in 2008 predated the US Cyber Command. This is the Air Force Cyber Command, were perhaps one of the first military organizations to use cyber in their name. What I in fact discovered, which surprised me even more, was these two comic book characters that predate the Cyber Command in many ways. Interestingly, they are both from the Marvel and DC universe. Imagine that. So there is Cyber, who is this guy, who is an adversary of Wolverine, mostly in the X-Men, which is kind of a subset of the Marvel universe, and we will not go into the intricacies of that, although we could definitely have an entire conference dedicated to that fascinating subject. And this lady, believe it or not, Dr. Cyber, almost like my sister, who is actually a doctor of cyber law, but this Dr. Cyber was actually an adversary of Wonder Woman back in 1968. So the word cyber can mean a ton of things. It can mean a military organization, of course. And why is it important that we speak about this? Well, from my point of view, one of the things that brings the community together, but also maybe tears it apart at times, is this insistence on jargon and on the fact that you know to use the right words at the right time. Do you speak the language? Can you pass a test? I will never forget how at my first DEF CON, a couple of very well-known hackers, whose names I should now omit from the record, I was chatting to them, and it was my first DEF CON, as I mentioned, and they were trying to quiz me on my knowledge. They were trying to see if I know what certain characters meant. Now, due to, I guess, my lack of understanding of the English language back then, or some other reason, I didn't quite perceive that they were asking me about the ampersand character. I didn't quite know that term. And for them, that was reason enough to consider me not elite. They were like, oh, yeah, we knew that you're not really a hacker, because I didn't pass that test. I didn't have that shibboleth, if you're familiar with that term. I didn't have the password to get into the club. That's something I'm really hopeful that we can change. And in sense, when we're trying to build a community, if somebody doesn't know a term, it's a great opportunity to teach them that term, to share the message, not to make fun of them. Now, speaking of jargons, actually a great opportunity for you all to learn some more hacker history is to look up the Juggernaut File, which from the end of the 70s until the late 90s, in fact, as it evolved into the new hacker dictionary, was a file that existed on various online systems and shared hacker slang terms and all kinds of references on how to use hacking terms and programming language. It was vastly based on the MIT, Stanford, and the computer programmer hubs of that era. Let me bring it up a little bit bigger for you. So Eric S. Raymond, who was one of the curators of the Juggernaut File, also created this fantastic document called How to Become a Hacker, written in 2001, believe it or not. So this is something from the Juggernaut File. It does speak about the definition of what it means to be a hacker. Originally, someone who makes furniture with an axe, but now it's a person who is either good at programming quickly. Not everything a hacker produces is a hack necessarily. He might be an expert at a particular program, for example, a sail hacker. This got nothing to do with sails and ships, but actually a computer system that was prevalent at the time. Or he might be a malicious or inquisitive meddler who tries to discover information by poking around. Hence, keyword hacker or network hacker. That's a definition I kind of relate with. But here's even something that even more people have related and resonated with. This is the Hacker Manifesto, originally coined the conscience of a hacker, written a day after the arrest of an infamous hacker called The Mentor in the UK. He was British. And he released this on Frack, which was, and still is, I believe, an online magazine for sharing hacker content. So the most powerful quotes from the Hacker Manifesto also resonated with the hacker's film. And of course, they are these really powerful words. Yes, I am a criminal. My crime is that of curiosity. My crime is that of judging people by what they say and what they think, not what they look like. My crime is that of outsmarting you, something that you will never forgive me for. It's really powerful. To this day, I get goosebumps when I read it out loud. And the Hacker Manifesto, I first discovered it when I watched the Hackers movie. But that brings up a next question, and I had a conversation with somebody earlier about this. Who is a hacker? Who gets to call themselves a hacker? How many people here in the room feel like they can comfortably say, hi, I'm XYZ and I'm a hacker? I would expect that at a hacker convention at BSides Las Vegas, many of us would feel comfortable calling ourselves hackers. Why aren't we? Did we not pass the test? Somebody didn't qualify us? We don't feel like we belong? Back again in the 90s, this sort of image was kind of a popular way to check, do you belong in a certain club? Are you a cyberpunk? This actually was published in Mondo magazine in 1993. And 1993 was actually a very transformative year for yours truly. So this is also what a hacker looks like. And this is kind of what I looked like around that time. But of course, here's the actual photo from the yearbook of my school. Some of you have already seen this, but for those of you who haven't, anybody want to guess where I am in that photo? And again, there are prizes to be won. Yes, please. Second, up. This?
No, left, down.
This guy?
Down.
This girl?
Yes.
No. But thank you for trying. Yes, Rex.
White shirt, middle row to the right.
Up. This person? You're not sure?
Yeah, no, is that you?
Well, it's definitely a cyberpunk, judging from the 1993 state-of-the-art Sony Walkman. But actually, Rex, you're a winner. You got it. It's me. And I was that much of a nerd back then. And that's what I really looked like. And that's what I wanted to look like. She was my hero, because when Angelina Jolie portrayed that high school hacker, she had short hair like I did, and that whole movie really created that image for me. Finally, for the first time, I realized my passion for technology, my curiosity, my inquisitiveness, it's called being a hacker. And it's a global community, according to that movie. It only took me a couple good years, almost 5 years, to really find my way into a fraction of that global community, the one that Hollywood showed me, has like computer, amazing computer animations, and everybody's got really cool handles, and they've got like TV shows, and that, if you remember what was those guys' names? Razor and Blade. They had this underground cool TV show. I was watching Space Rogue on Hacker News Network, and I don't know how many of you have seen that, but that was kind of my connection to that hacker world or hacker community. Until the year 2000, or the year Y2K, when the first ever international hacker convention in Tel Aviv took place. Wait a minute, let me let the whole animation play out. Check it out. This is an animated GIF from 20 years ago. I think that's kind of cool that it still works. But this was the first ever hacker event, international hacker event in my hometown of Tel Aviv. I found myself there as a volunteer, for the first time really feeling that immediate connection to that global community. And then we also felt a connection to the political landscape as a member of Israeli parliament tried to shut down the conference. And that speaks to that value or ethos of hackers having to be on the outside, having to be maybe countercultural, maybe on the fringes. And if you're adopted and embraced by the mainstream, can you still be a hacker? I wonder. It's a question for all of us to consider. Many years have gone since then. In fact, in 2004, I organized another Y2 hack, and I was able to really bring 1,000 hackers in Tel Aviv together. That was in 2004. The next time I was able to do that was almost 10 years after that, because I founded BSidesLV in Israel. And actually, this year was our largest yet, and we've had our event run for 4 times, bringing more than 1,000 hackers together. I'm very proud of being able to do that. You might think, hey, why does Israel need a hacker community event? There's just an amazing cybersecurity ecosystem in Israel. We keep hearing more and more about it. Well, it turns out that we had that amazing business ecosystem in Israel, but we didn't really have a space for that community. And between 2004 and basically 2015 or 16, we really didn't have a lot of hacker events per se. I also started a group called Leading Cyber Ladies, which brings together women in hacking, and we actually have one of our members here today. Hello, Chrissy from London. The group now has ladies in New York City, Toronto, and of course in Israel. Occasionally, I write about my passion for the hacker community and what it can do. I wrote this little thing for Motherboard, and I'm not just inspired by Hollywood movies. I'm also inspired by real-life people. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention Barnaby Jack, as we are standing on his shoulders in many ways today. For those of you who are not familiar with him, his research work on medical devices catalyzed, I believe, many other researchers and many changes in that ecosystem that the I Am The Cavalry has really been deeply involved with. Barnaby said that sometimes it's up to us hackers to demonstrate a threat so that we can spark a solution. That was something I absolutely resonated with, and it was my original inspiration to think about the way hackers are working together, but also individually, kind of like an immune system, if you will. And that was the basis for my 2014 TED Talk, Hackers Are the Immune System of the Internet. I still feel like the immune system analogy works, because an immune system isn't a single organ, a process, a chemical, or one type of cell. Indeed, it requires all of these different elements to work together in order to help make a person's life better or safer. And that's one of the reasons that I'm actually really passionate about I Am The Cavalry. And hopefully over the next, or rather within the last 2 days, you've heard many ideas on how you can be part of something like that. So for me, I first heard about Am The Cavalry because of that TED Talk. And it was Bo Woods that reached out to me and said, you know, we've got this thing going on with hackers that are trying to make a difference in the world where it counts. And I was immediately hooked. I said, okay, sign me up. How can I help? For me, helping is sharing the word, sharing the stories, maybe even sharing them with popular media organizations like this show on Netflix with Bill Nye that I was on a while ago. Is that funny, Rex? Okay, thank you. I thought it was really, in fact, this was actually filmed during B-Sides Las Vegas 2 years ago. So I flew in, was at B-Sides, flew out to LA to film this, and then came back to B-Sides. And I couldn't tell anybody anything about it because it was all very secret. But you can now watch the show. It's on Netflix. Bill Nye Saves the World. However, the point I'm trying to make is that for me, saving the world, or for me, making that impact is by storytelling and by sharing the word about Am The Cavalry and about our hacker community. Now, I know that I need to wrap up, but I do have a couple of other fun stuff that I want to show you. So bear with me for just a minute here, okay? Because I promised, first of all, that there would prizes, and second of all, that there is fun stuff. So we talked a little bit about the past of the word hacker, and I talked a little bit about my past. What about our future? Well, our future can seem quite scary, especially as we live in a time where many computer systems, in a sense, have been weaponized. Maybe it's because it's an end-of-life operating system environment. Or maybe it's because there are people out there that are very happy to use hackers for their own means or for their own needs. Sometimes people who believe that hackers are just like painters who wake up in the morning in a good mood and start painting. Of course, if they work for this gentleman, I don't know if they have a lot of time for painting, but they definitely have a way to use their skills for the benefits of that country. So the future that we're looking at is more connected than ever before. It's got more bots, machines, and devices in it. This is a reference to the classic Futurama episode, Fear of a Bot Planet. It's got AI, oh my, whatever that means, it's gonna be a part of our future as well. And as we look towards that future, without more security researchers working together, but also maintaining the individual aspects of their local community, of their own pathway into this world, I don't think we have a chance. In fact, you know, the outlook might be like this, or if you're in Vegas, like this. If you haven't heard that last week, Vegas was under this plague of bugs of the six-legged kind. Six legs? I think so. So today, the global hacker community is spreading. William Gibson said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Where can you find that future? I believe you can find it in the global hacker community. This is a map of global B-Sides events all over the world. If your hometown is not on that map, start a B-Sides. If your hometown is on that map, go volunteer, support in any way you can. Now here's another map. This is a map of security researchers reporting vulnerabilities to Google. This is from the data released from their bug bounty program. As you can see, it's not just a US or a North American culture or movement. It is vastly global, and it's becoming even more so. This map is from the FIRST Association. Who here is familiar with FIRST? Just a couple of you. For those who are not, that is the Forum of Incident Responders. In other words, it's an association of all of the CERTs, the Computer Emergency Response Teams in the world. And they've got 500 organizations listed all over the world. In fact, they have an event coming up for small island nations focusing on cybersecurity in Fiji. So it is an absolutely vastly more globally diverse community than it used to be. Just for reference, the first ever CERT, the first ever Computer Emergency Response Team was in Carnegie Mellon, and it was actually part of the university. And in fact, all other organizations that use the term CERT, I believe, must have some sort of like a copyright understanding with the original CERT for their usage of that acronym. So as I wrap things up, I think I shared a lot about what our global community can look like, what a community means. Here are just a couple resources. Please feel free to take a photo of the next slide with some ideas. I definitely relied on works like Hackers, Heroes of the Computer Revolution by Stephen Levi, which came out maybe 20 years ago, and the article, The Anthropology of Hackers from The Atlantic magazine by Professor Gabriella Coleman, who as always inspires me. And there are a few more works that you may want to check out there. I want to leave you with a final quote, if you will. I'm just giving you a moment to take a photo without interrupting the image. Okay, so this final quote. That person who helps others simply because it should or must be done, and because it is the right thing to do, is indeed, without a doubt, a real superhero. I absolutely believe in that message, of course shared by the late, but hopefully sainted, Stan Lee, creator of so many heroes and stories that have inspired so many of us. A person I know that Josh has actually had the honor of meeting in person, and I will be always deeply envious of you for that. For me, heroism can have different shapes and sizes. I like to dress up as Catpool, which is a cat version of Deadpool, and hang out with my other Deadpool friends. And if you take a look at the photo, you'll see there are all kinds of dead people. You've got Fanpool and Lady Deadpool. Somewhere in the background is Fatpool, and this cyberpunk person who's maybe from the future. Maybe he's trying to be Cable. In any case, I would encourage you to think about, what does a hacker community mean for you? And does it have to be unified? Do we all have to speak the same language, know the slang terms? Or can we just all get along nicely even if we're not sharing that particular subset of words and backgrounds? After all, from my point of view, I will never give up the hacker community. So please join me in a resounding chant of Hack the Planet. Hack the planet! Thank you very much for your time and attention, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.